Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. What could be more fitting for a Halloween episode during Year of the Crossover than a comic teaming up someone who preys on superstitious, cowardly criminals and another whose power is literally derived from hell? I'm taking issue with Spawn Batman, written by Frank Miller, featuring art by Todd McFarlane, Steve Oliff, and the group Ollie Optics. Now let's see if a comic with such a venerable 90s pedigree makes us want to turn the page or turn our heads.
The cover has a black background for the credits, title, character emblems, while in a green-lined panel the two characters are leaping to the right, each in different stages of punching air, I guess, against some lightning bolts. Also, I think it's worth noting that this is stated as being presented by Image Comics, not Image NDC. The inside cover even has a box explaining this is a companion to The Dark Knight Returns, and does not represent then-current DC continuity.
Which, while not necessarily a negative point to the comic, I do find a little odd that they didn't just add DC's logo and say it was an Elseworlds story. It's not like DKR is a definitive future at this point, or even in 1994.
We open to dragged-out, scattered narration as Batman walks through a warehouse with a shoulder wound that looks like his shoulder's just tinted red and blood dripping down his arm. A problem he's not going to deal with using any kind of medical equipment he might have in his belt because he's too busy berating a bunch of punks he knocked out. He finds crates of weapons from a falling dictatorship that have found their way to Gotham streets, including a high-tech gauntlet. He's then attacked by a robot with pointed claw legs that knocks him around some.
Admittedly, it does look cool, but doesn't seem overly practical. For something that has to weigh several hundred pounds, and given the design and placement of the body itself, having such narrow points of contact to the ground can't be great for its balance. But if any of you are spider robot experts, feel free to cite examples to the contrary.
Taking advantage of the stupid machine's hesitation, possibly thinking he's dead, Bats puts on the high-tech glove, thus enhanced with superhuman strength, and attacks. A cracked visor reveals a human inside, scared and confused, so the Dark Knight liberates him from the machine. Except it's just a head. That's when the robot self-destructs, killing the head museum candidate. We get two panels introducing us to Margaret Love, founder of the Heal the World Foundation, accepting an award for her humanitarian efforts, and her desire to help the disenfranchised. Then it's right to the Batcave, where Alfred has chamomile tea.
What? Chamomile? With its alkaloid compounds and unknown chemicals? What were you thinking, man? Did you learn nothing from JLA Witchblade?
But his boss would rather just have his wound taken care of, and he feels more comfortable with his cowl on, so screw making the butler's job any easier. After having a staring contest with the deceased head, he discovers the man's identity, Louis Bacchus, a New York native that was presumed dead. And Bruce's expression goes strangely somber for a moment as Alfred treats his shoulder. Pity. About the tea, I mean.
Yeah, because the homeless dude's head that was found inside a killer robot is really more of a party favor. What the heck, Pennyworth?
Bats tells him to put the head on ice and the tech gloves in the vault while he heads to the Big Apple, where he is on the very next splash page. It's neat if you're big on architecture and ludicrously long capes, and less interested in the comic's co-star. It's not long before news spreads of a shadowy figure stopping numerous crimes, with one anchor speculating that Batman is in town. He overhears some bums talking about a guy named Al with magic powers, but he disregards them as nonsense.
Because it's not like Batman knows anyone personally that has superhuman or mystic abilities, right?
We're treated to another splash page featuring Spawn, looking for some missing friends of his. Two sociopaths, one of whom is named Gorky, try setting a sleeping homeless man on fire after dousing him in gasoline. But the fire does a 180 around the unsuspecting sleeper and goes after the two arsonists instead. Hey, fire can't do that!
Fire can't go through doors, stupid. It's not a ghost.
They literally run into Spawn, who asks them why he shouldn't send them to the same place he gets his powers from. And then Gorky tries shooting him. So it's off to hell with them, Lasagna Face burning them alive just as Bats swings onto the scene. Narration calls him a late-coming witness to what he views as a wanton act of murder, but I don't think he'd think any differently if he had shown up when the fire was being manipulated. At least, not a typical portrayal of Batman. He glides in on another splash page. Seriously? Isn't that a bit much? Anyway, he swoops in with an attack that'd cripple most people, and... Wait a minute, what happened with Spawn's mask? It was off when Batman attacked, and is back on in the next page.
I'm aware that his suit is kind of alive, but I do remember reading a Spawn comic when I was a kid where the mask could be removed like... well, a mask, because I remember a homeless dude trying it on for funsies, and it didn't really end well. But is it more like a garment that can be removed, or is it like the Venom symbiote, or does it depend on the writer?
In any event, this strange opponent seems uniquely resilient, so Batman doesn't let up. It's like punching a brick wall, like kicking a slab of granite.
Like elbowing sandstone. Like curb-stomping concrete. Like head-butting marble. Don't ask how I know about that last part. Oh.
3 batarangs are thrown, intended to leave wounds just shy of lethal, but they're either deflected or caught. Batman realizes his opponent still needs to breathe, and throws down a nerve gas that seems to take some of the fight out of Spawn, whose mask has suddenly disappeared again, which is extra weird since I figured it'd automatically offer some kind of protection as if instinctively, but hey, who am I to question something tailored by the devil? After a series of panels closing in on the Bat emblem over some fighting sound effects, Bats realizes he's outmatched and throws another gas capsule to make a getaway. They trade bravado heavy barbs as Al loses his lunch, and 10 blocks later, Batman is resetting certain bones and joints, realizing the punk was just holding back. Spawn, meanwhile, does what anyone feeling the effects of nerve gas and a savage beating would do. Goes to heal the world's New York building, surpassing its advanced security lock that was covered in fake rust.
So, how was fake rust supposed to be a deterrent? Because I'm getting that was supposed to be the point, but I imagine that if someone wanted to break in and get something inside, and they thought it was rusted, they'd just try and break the lock, find out it was fake rust, and if they couldn't pick the lock, maybe move on or find some other way inside. I really don't know what Miller was going for here.
Working on a tip from someone named Silvio, whom he must have consulted before the story, Spawn enters the mission and finds, I guess, some computers and high-tech equipment. It's a little indistinct, but whatever. He gets attacked by a robot similar to the one that attacked Batman earlier, uses his finite hell power to knock off a gun and use that instead. You'd think maybe whatever the gun uses to trigger firing or as ammo would have been connected to its primary body, but hey, I guess not. Among the wreckage is another human head, this time of Spawn's buddy Chuck, and the remains of the robot hobbling around activates a video playback of Margaret Love, a hypnotic message of a final stage of rehabilitation, alleviating people of free will. Al recalls a time before he died, recognizing the woman from some event, when people died in agony and she smiled. His fury causes an explosion of power, which probably doesn't bode well for Chuck, but at this point you could probably consider it a mercy. Elsewhere, Batman is bandaging himself up, trying not to dwell on his earlier fight when he sees the bat signal. You know, in New York!
Did Jim Gordon start franchising without telling me?
He arrives at the source of the light and sees Margaret Love, an exquisite angel of mercy, begging for help. Were he not what he is, he would call this feeling desire.
Her?
She tells him her security footage caught a figure matching Spawn's description, destroying her mission, and she fears her fundraiser on her boat tonight, with the US president possibly attending, could be the next target. Bats promises no harm will befall the event, As narration notes, he calls Alfred to send him something, and it arrives 2 hours later.
Just don't think about the details of how the item was sent in 2 hours in a manner that would allow Batman to retrieve it on the down low. Because the writer certainly didn't.
Spawn is with his homeless pals in an alley, still retching from the gas attack earlier. Weird, it didn't seem to bother him while he was investigating the mission 2 hours prior, apparently right after his fight with the Dark Knight. His friends don't believe him, but he insists he fought the Bat, and that he's not the hero everyone says he is if he's working with Margaret Love, or as Al previously knew her, Nadia Vladova.
Where did this come from? Why does he automatically assume that Batman is in cahoots with some woman he only recently remembered from his past? There's no indication that the meeting at the Bat Signal got around to him or his friends, and beyond that, everyone else knows her as a humanitarian, so wouldn't the first and most logical conclusion be that she tricked Batman, not that he's evil like her?
On a splash page, Pointy Ears closes in on Spawn. Weird how they suddenly decided to do this from Al's POV with his fingers in the way. He's now armed with the tech glove he confiscated, but for some reason his narration pluralizes it to gloves, like he's wearing two. And somehow they let him laugh off his wounds from earlier. So they have some other ability to suppress pain, or is Bats just getting his giggles from pummeling a dude that could have beaten him? Because either way, he's still wounded, but... moving on. While Spawn's mask again flips on and off like it's attached to a light switch someone's playing with, he remembers his training as a soldier and relies on that in place of his magic. They call each other names, make threats, act boastful, as they exchange punches, and even after they both fall back from exhaustion. That's when 3 more killer bots show up, and, strangely enough, all of them attack Batman.
Narration says that Margaret Love sent them to tie up loose ends. But why would they go after the guy that agreed to help her, and not the one that actually caused damage to her evil lair? I'm pretty sure one robot can take out a weakened Batman, so why not send the other 2 after the dude with magic powers?
Al sees they're killing his opponent, and uses his magic to destroy the robots. And yet Batsy still insults him, even as he's at death's door. Using different colored magic, he begins healing Pointy Ears, and also communicates telepathically on another splash page of... Okay, I have no idea. There's a glowing ball, some water-like swirls. It looks neat, but I genuinely have no idea what it's supposed to be. Even in this case, they're arguing like embittered school children, and despite demands to get out of Batman's head, Spawn insists on showing him who Margaret Love really is. Intercut with the Wayne murders because, of course. The most we get about Love's alleged crimes is that she did something terrible to some soldiers, but it's pretty light on the details. In any event, Bruce finally understands the danger this woman poses, and they set out after her on a 2-page spread.
That sure wouldn't make a neat-looking poster that I probably wouldn't hang up after reading this comic.
On her lavish boat, Love is entertaining oodles of politicians, though not the president. She tells them of the struggles of trying to help everyone while they drink punch that has no alcohol, but does have drugs that make them suggestible. The problem, Margaret says, is people, who wreck nature to make malls and toxic waste dumps. 2 generals high-five when she reveals a cache of weaponry that narration hints was from the same fallen dictatorship mentioned earlier, saying that her solution is to start a war that grows so massive it consumes itself, and when the fires die out, she'll use therapy, technology, and force to liberate people of free will, thus saving the planet. Everyone applauds, and the president arrives 20 minutes late, sipping some punch, while filled in on the details by other guests.
Sorry for being late. Had to catch Saturday Night Live. That Phil Hartman does fine satire.
Bats and Lasagna Face have infiltrated the ship, maintaining a telepathic link to better coordinate, though Batman hates the idea and can't help but continue being insulting. From all indications, you're dumber than Clark.
Aww.
They bust through the hull, take out a cyborg, and see the considerable arsenal at Love's disposal. All while Bats calls him a boy with stupid chains and Yeah, this is so freaking mature. I guess Al must have struck one of the weapons because there's an explosion that leads to other explosions, and the panels are kind of vague beyond that. Spawn insists that Love should die for what she's done, but Bat says she doesn't have to, as he glides away from her and she gets impaled by some wreckage. Which is weird because the panels here make it seem as if pointy debris is about to fall on her, and this next one sees her impaled hanging off the deck. This progression makes no sense. But that doesn't stop her from launching a nuke into Manhattan to fulfill her dream of paradise. And that doesn't make much sense either. If she, the glorious mastermind, dies, how will any attack lead to some glorious future? Anyway, Spawn bear hugs his new bestest friend, and they teleport on top the missile. Al warns that this particular model of nuke has circuitry designed to appear redundant, and a false move could kill millions. And Bats warns not to touch his cape, because apparently no one touches the cape. After some narration about his genius, the Dark Knight has neutralized the threat, and the missile lands harmlessly in the river, while the pair teleport away.
Hey, yeah, so what about all those people on that ship you callously blew up? I mean, the president, the vice president, and a slew of others are still on there, right? On a burning ship. Gonna do anything about that, fellas?
Nope. They teleport into an alley, specifically the one Al usually hangs around in, and Batman insults him some more before threatening to see him again when he finds the power to bring him down. Spawn makes the absolutely valid point that they just saved the city and maybe the world, but again, not the boat full of people, in a situation neither of them could have handled alone. So maybe they should bury the hatchet. Instead, the comic closes on a splash page of a batarang lodged in Al's face. And in following issues of Spawn around this time, he would have shoelaces stitching this area up, meaning this story is also canon with the Spawn books. After the story is a couple pages of artwork, a 2-page image of the pair and a single-page one, possibly an alternate cover idea, I don't know for sure, and a memorial page for influential artist Jack the King Kirby, who died the same year this story came out.
And that was Spawn Batman. And quite frankly, not even the armies of Satan himself could make me recommend it.
In many respects, the art is fine, but there's confusing progression, indistinct background elements, maybe one or too many unnecessary splash pages that feel like filler, and the inconsistency of Spawn's mask. The story has some promise, but in execution it just becomes a cape measuring contest. Worse than in Batman and Daredevil, given how absolutely childish both these characters act. You're stupid! No, you're stupid! No, you're stupid! You're stupider! Give me a break. Constant name-calling, silly tough guy attitudes, Batman being a complete jerk. It simply isn't that great or fun a read. Occasionally the narration will be fine, even clever sometimes, but then there are those other moments where it just becomes repetitive. On top of that, there isn't much context or backstory for Maggie McNukes-a-lot here. She's just somebody Spawn knew in his previous life, did some terrible things we barely see, and at some point adopted some stupid save-the-world motif in her villainy.
Unless 90s era machismo and sadism is your thing, I'd give this sucker a pass. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.